Have you ever been setting up an account and you have to enter answers to these security questions? And those security questions ask things like, what was the name of your third grade math teacher? Who comes up with these kinds of questions? It seems to me they're either really bored, really tired, or they're wanting to make it as difficult as possible for you to ever recover your account information. Instead, they could ask things like, who was the best teacher you ever had? Or who was the worst boss you ever had? Things like that typically stick in our mind. What makes the difference between a leader of excellence or one of terror? Well, stay tuned. We're going to talk about that in today's episode.
If your desire is to become spiritually stronger, emotionally healthier, and relationally smarter, you're at the right place. Speaker and writer Stephanie Smith inspires and equips you to achieve these three key aims. If you're a parent, you'll also learn how to raise empowered kids, ready for adulthood. Let's get started.
Welcome back to the Life's Key 3 podcast. I'm delighted that you are here with me today. If you haven't already, make sure to sign up for High Impact. It's a valuable weekly newsletter that you can find on my website, stephaniepresents.com. We have been walking through the book of Nehemiah, and it's taken us a while because this Old Testament story is packed with insights that are deep and meaningful. And you don't have to dig really, really deep to find those, but some of those you kind of have to really I think more slow down more than dig deep. You just have to slow down and read this book a little more slowly. Nehemiah is a concise writer, and he packs a lot of punch into just a few words. What is your idea of leaders and of leadership? If you hear the word leader, what immediately comes to mind? What role? What person? I hope that what you will do today is you will listen with an expanded idea of leadership. You know, it's not just people who hold certain titles like president, chief executive officer, principal, or pastor that are leaders. Leaders are teachers. If you're in the hospital, the nurse in charge is a leader that you want to know is a person of excellence, not just the surgeon who's going to conduct your surgery tomorrow morning. Also, as parents, we are absolutely leaders. And this applies to both moms and dads because both are responsible and involved in the upbringing of their children. So, as we talk about leadership and as we continue to go through this book, I want you to have an expanded view and mindset of leadership and see this as applying to others and to yourself. And even if right now you're thinking, I don't really see myself in too many leadership positions, remember this leadership is more about a mindset and a skill set than it is just holding a certain position or role. I would guess that we all have experiences with people who were in positions of leadership, but they are not the people that we would say, hey, that was a real leader. Today, as we finish up in the fifth chapter of Nehemiah, again, just in these few verses here, we're going to look at and see some differences between what makes a superb leader and what makes a harmful leader. And like most things in life, it's typically not a matter that people are all 100% one or 100% the other. But definitely, we don't want somebody who's like 50-50. We don't want a superb leader half the time and somebody who's harmful the other half of the time. Well, there are some distinguishing characteristics that we can see in the second part of this chapter, beginning in verse 14 and continuing through verse 19. The first characteristic that we see is that superb leaders don't ask the question, what can I get? Instead, they ask, what do I need? They don't come at it with a position and a mindset, a perspective of what's in it for me, but what do I need in order to serve my role, in order to serve the purposes for which I'm here. Now, Nehemiah here is talking about a food allowance, and we can kind of just glide over that and think, what's the big deal about a food allowance? I mean, who really cares whether he killed one ox, every so many days or 10? What's the big deal? But it is a big deal because it goes to perspective and mindset. He's recording these things, one, to establish a historical record, but he's also demonstrating a mindset. He's listing practices not just to draw attention to himself, but he's also wanting to establish a record that people can look back on when they have leaders in the future and they can say, here are some good guidelines that we need to go by when we are selecting other leaders that we have in the future. Food was a big deal, not just because, people needed it to provide for their minimal nourishment. It also was a big deal in Nehemiah's role because people could they could basically be bribed with food to be able to come and to have this great meal, that you had an invitation to come to the governor's court and have dinners and have your food served to you. That was a way that you could win people over to your side. And nothing wrong with doing that in an open way, but there is something very wrong about doing that in a way that is manipulative. So while the food here that Nehemiah outlines does matter, that's not the principal point here. And we'll miss the real point he's wanting to make here, which is about how do you approach your role as a leader? Do you ask, hey, what can I get out of this? Or do you ask, what do I need? Not just what do I want, but what do I need in order to accomplish my objectives? Harmful leaders, on the other hand, take all they can get and then some. And we see that this has been the habit of other governors. They've said, hey, if I am entitled to this, if this is the allowance that the authorities above me have said that I can get from these people, well, then I'm going to get all that I can. I'm not going to give any of it back. I'm going to take full advantage of every last opportunity that I can, and I'm going to take full advantage of every blessing, benefit, whatever that comes with this position. And this is one area where Nehemiah stands in sharp contrast to the governors that have come before him, as well as in contrast to the other leaders who are there around him at that time. Another distinction that we have is that superb leaders lead by example. Nehemiah and his servants, the people that are part of his team, if you will, are out working on rebuilding the walls themselves. I mean, they are literally getting their hands dirty. They aren't just telling others what to do. Nehemiah is not just sitting up in the air-conditioned, palace somewhere and sending out blueprints and saying, here's what everybody needs to do. No, he's down in the thick of it himself. And that's what superb leaders do. They don't have a mindset that says this work is beneath me. Harmful leaders, on the other hand, take advantage of others and allow their team, their favorites, if you will, to take advantage of others as well. They create cultures where every person being out for themselves becomes the norm and the expectation. Nehemiah leads with humility. It's interesting here because, again, Nehemiah had served the king of the entire Persian Empire in a high cabinet level position. And so when he shows up here in Jerusalem, he's not just, some guy that just happens to appear out of nowhere. This man has had experience with the wealthiest, most powerful people in the land, not just in the Jewish nation, but in the entire Persian Empire. He had risen through the ranks to hold the position that he had. Again, we want to remember, cupbearer, this wasn't the guy who sipped the wine to see if it was poison before it went to the king. That is not what his position was. It was a very high level position where the king invested a tremendous amount of trust in him. And Nehemiah was experienced with the wealthiest and the most powerful people in the empire. And yet here he is, he's back home in this rundown city of Jerusalem, willing to get down and to also do the work, to get his hands dirty rebuilding these walls. He leads with humility. And we saw in the last episode, of last Tuesday's episode, we also saw where Nehemiah would not tolerate letting others who were in positions of power and leadership exploit other people. That's one of the hallmarks of superb leaders. They don't allow cultures within their organization to exist where exploiting, manipulating, abusing other people is acceptable. They don't turn a blind eye to those things if they are occurring. Harmful leaders, on the other hand, focus on themselves and they don't learn to even bother what impacts other people. They don't even have an awareness or a care about what's it like to be in these other roles and positions. And this is one of the distinguishing marks of a truly great leader. They don't just go into an organization. And again, I don't want you to just think here in terms of some huge business. This might be a school. It might be a community, all volunteer position. Leaders aren't defined by whether they get a paycheck or not. You can have volunteer leaders, and these principles apply as much to them, or should, as for people who are in paid positions of leadership. One of the common characteristics that you see of leaders who, for example, do go into organizations that are failing, that are weak, that have had either a moral failure or an economic failure, they're not doing well. And those leaders who end up turning an organization around, one of the first things that you typically find that they do is they go in and they find out what's it really like not to be a leader here. What's it really like to be the boots on the ground person? And they take the time to really learn that, to understand how are our policies and our practices impacting our franchise owners? How are they impacting the people that are in the pews? How are they impacting the people who are out soliciting donations? Harmful leaders don't bother with any of that because they're just out for themselves. But superb leaders are compassionate people. Here's the thing, you cannot have greater compassion than you have awareness. It's just impossible. You have to have compassion that comes as a result of knowing the needs and the situation of the people that you are entrusted to lead. Harmful leaders like to operate in the dark. They want to keep their actions hidden. They want to keep it within either just to themselves or within a very small contingent of people who are involved in and okaying, or at least turning a blind eye to, the very same destructive and harmful actions. But superb leaders volunteer to be transparent. They don't have to be asked, invited, bribed, or threatened to be transparent and open. They set up practices and policies. And again, this is whether it is somebody in their home or whether it's somebody in a church or in a business. They, out of their own heart, have practices and policies so that they are transparent. And a key difference here is when they are the ones initiating transparency versus being the ones who are waiting to be asked to be transparent. It's a very big key difference there. Truly superb leaders take the initiative to be transparent, They don't just say, "Oh, yeah, I'm willing to be transparent. Come and ask if you want to know something." They are proactive in being transparent. When Nehemiah records the amount of food and drink that he was serving to himself, to his team, to other guests, when he documents and details this, he's not just doing this because he doesn't have anything better to do at the end of the day. What he is putting in writing is an open record of transparency. He doesn't want anybody to be able to come back and then or in the future and say, "Oh, this is what was going on." He's documenting it so that people will have a written record. He's taking the initiative. Nobody is there telling him he has to do any of this. King Artaxerxes has made no requirement that Nehemiah leads the way that he does. He's given permission to go back and to oversee the rebuilding of the walls. But Artaxerxes was a dictator. Okay, there's no democracy here in ancient Persia. And he doesn't really care how Nehemiah gets the job done. He just cares that he gets it done. But Nehemiah leads out of the integrity and the humility of his own heart. And it's interesting to me because all of these characteristics that we see in Nehemiah and that we've kind of outlined here, these are the same characteristics that we see in Jesus. Did Jesus come to earth saying, "Hey, what can I get out of this?" Hardly. Okay. He doesn't do that. He doesn't take advantage of people and to get everything for himself. He also gets his hands dirty. I mean, God made flesh. Jesus, Emmanuel, to come and to live amongst us. This is the supreme leader of leader, the King of kings. And he has the willingness and to have the humility to take on the form of a human person. If God can do that for us, and since he has done that for us, then we absolutely need to be practicing that in our own lives. Also, superb leaders create cultures where exploiting others isn't acceptable. Jesus had a few things to say to the leaders of his day when they were exploiting others. And I'm not even talking about the Roman leaders. I'm talking about, again, the religious, cultural leaders here amongst the Jewish people and how they were exploiting and taking advantage of their own brethren, just like what was going on in Nehemiah's time. And some of his harshest words are to people who are practicing that. We also see, of course, tremendous compassion that is above and beyond what we as individuals have the capacity to have, but we can continue to grow in our compassion and our humility as we follow Christ. And then also we see Christ being willing to be entirely transparent. And we see that practice throughout the scripture. Does that mean that we understand everything about God? No, but it's not because God is keeping devious secrets from us. I mean, that's a whole nother topic to talk about the mystery of God, because our minds cannot contain and fathom and truly grasp the whole character and the nature and the goodness of God. But he is transparent. He doesn't make himself hidden away somewhere where we have little hope of finding him. I mean, he comes and he lives amongst us. And we see evidence of him throughout creation and in so many other ways. And I just point that out to say that one of the ways that we can ask, is something true, is to say, do we see it modeled in the life of Christ? And absolutely, we see these principles back here in this Old Testament book and this person of Nehemiah. We see those also evidenced in the life of Christ. And that's one of the reasons, the most important reason why we can say these aren't just leadership principles that are pulled out of nowhere. These are true principles of how we are supposed to live our lives in positions of leadership. And again, whether that's you as a mom leading your kids, raising your kids, whether it's you as a husband leading in your home, whether you're leading an all volunteer organization or committee, you're a pastor, you're a business owner, in whatever area that you have a leadership role or you are preparing for one, either because you know it's coming or just to be ready so when God decides to open a door for you, that you can have the skill set and the mindset to be a superb leader and not a harmful one. And lastly, what we see as Nehemiah closes out this chapter 5, we see where he has this prayer: remember for my good, oh my God, all that I have done for this people. Now, at first glance, that can seem a little arrogant. I mean, here I've been talking about humility and superb leadership, and then he closes all of this out by basically saying, hey, God, look at me. Remember all the good that I've done here. But I don't think this is an arrogant man who's saying, okay, God, I've showed up. I've done the right thing. It's time to pay me back. I don't think so. I think when we look at Nehemiah's position, he is not surrounded with people who are there cheering for him, encouraging him. He is dealing with one conflict after another, in-house and out of house, so to speak. And it's just one thing after the other, after the other, after the other. And I think he's wearied. And he seems to lack having a peer or a peer group that can encourage and strengthen and give him affirmation. And this is where he's saying, okay, God, you know what maybe nobody else here fully knows or recognizes or even cares about. So God, I'm going to ask you to remember me, God, to look upon me, to see, hey, I have been making the effort to serve you with faithfulness, with integrity, with righteousness. And there is nothing wrong with us coming to God and saying, hey, God, remember me. Remember my efforts to walk with faithfulness and in righteousness before you. That's not a selfish prayer. Now, demanding that God somehow, reimburses for that is a whole different thing. But I don't think that's what Nehemiah is doing here at all. So don't be afraid for yourself as an individual or in a capacity of leadership to be able to say, hey, God, look upon me, see what I'm doing here, see what I've been trying to accomplish here. And I ask that you would remember the good that I am trying to do on behalf of the people that I am leading. All right, my friend, that's going to wrap up this week's episode here for Tuesday. And it's also going to wrap up the 5th chapter of the book of Nehemiah. And we'll be picking up with that as we continue with next Tuesday's episode. In the meantime, again, if you haven't already, hop on over to stephaniepresents.com, sign up for the High Impact newsletter there. And also, if you are looking for information and encouragement that is rich both in biblical truth and teaching and also packed with common sense and a lot of research, then check out my speaking engagements that I have on my website. And also know that I do consider custom topics. I only talk on things that I am prepared and qualified for. All right, remember this. You have an impact that is immeasurable, eternal, and irreplaceable. I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening. Visit the website, stephaniepresents.com, and sign up for High Impact to join the mission of building spiritually strong, emotionally healthy, and relationally smart women and families. You can also book Stephanie to speak at your event and check out additional resources. Together, we can invite and equip generations to engage fully in God's grand story.